Welcome to Melt University. This series will help you build your brand, inform you on a variety of career paths, and introduce you to top executives in sports and marketing. Now, here's your host, the president and CEO of Melt, one of the largest independent sports and event marketing agencies in the country, Vince Thompson.
Welcome back, students. Virtual Melt University. We are rolling into the spring. Daylight saving time is coming up in a week or two, my favorite time of the year. We're starting to see restrictions ease in states. The SEC is talking about full stadiums in the fall, so we're seeing green shoots all around. And speaking of green shoots, we've got a really special guest today. It's become a dear friend of mine and a business partner of mine, innovative entrepreneur in the world of sports and college sports. And you're going to be hearing more from him and me and our partner, Jason Belzer, whom you've heard in the past. But Matt Roberts is the founder and CEO of Drive & Company. He's one of my partners and co-founders of SANIL, Student Athlete NIL. But more important, he also is one of the leading voices and narratives in college athletics. He started a newsletter for listeners that all of you should read every day called D1.Ticker, D2.Ticker, D3.Ticker, as well as Athletic Director U. If there's anything that you need to ever know about college sports or all of these major issues that are coming up with NIL or anything, these are the must reads for you into the future, because it's just chock full of information, job leads, connections, relationships. Graduated from University of North Carolina, Asheville, master's in sports administration from Louisville. Has been very, very involved, also as an entrepreneur, very involved in youth sports and those types of things, and 24/7 baseball and Jam Active. And we're going to talk about a lot about that today and the future of college athletics. But Matt, welcome to Virtual Melt University.
What's up, Vince? Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, it's I talk to you all the time, and I don't get to see you as much as I want, but we've been wanting to get you on for a while, and I think our students are going to be delighted to listen to you today. But before we dive into the present, we like to throw it all the way back to our guests to kind of where it all started. Where did your passion for business, where did your passion for sports, where did all of this begin, and where did it coalesce?
Yeah, my story is pretty simple, but I think there's a couple of interesting takeaways for students of any age. And I think one of the key points of our conversation here is a student isn't just somebody who's in school right now, right? I mean, curiosity and continual learning, no matter how old you are, where you are in the business hierarchy of your organization, no matter where you are in your career, one of the keys is continuous learning and the curiosity to hone your craft and also improve your weaknesses and simply learn. So my story, I grew up here in Louisville, Kentucky. I had a grandfather, my late grandfather, who ran our family insurance business, who, when you were a young guy in our family, you helped with a newspaper carrying route. So you'd get up at 4:30 in the morning, you'd go deliver your 100 papers, you'd be back in bed, and you'd get another hour of sleep before getting up to go to church or school or whatever. So the entrepreneurial roots in my family were probably mostly from him and running the insurance business, but also after he retired, just he needed something to do. He was a hustler. He was a hardworking blue-collar guy. And so he delivered newspapers. And so those of us grandchildren quickly got wrapped into that business as well. And it taught you the ability that you can operate on little to no sleep. It taught you that some sweat equity was always worth it. It taught you that you longed to go back to sleep after that morning, and that hour of sleep you got after delivering papers was the best hour of sleep you got that whole night. And we developed that attitude very early. I think I might have been 11 or 12 when we started delivering papers. So that became second nature. And then my father was a football coach at Eastern Kentucky for a handful of years, Eastern Kentucky University in Richmond, Kentucky, and then was a high school football coach. So my upbringing was very much high school sports, OVC, Ohio Valley Conference sports. We would drive past Lexington every Saturday to go to Richmond, and we didn't care about the SEC game that was happening in Richmond. We cared about EKU and
Wow.
UT Morton or EKU in Austin P or EKU in Eastern Illinois. That was my introduction to college athletics. And I think it weaves into the rest of what we'll discuss. But my introduction to college athletics was not certainly I was a Kentucky fan growing up, and my family, we were diehard Kentucky basketball fans, but actually standing on sidelines and understanding how coaches interacted with student athletes. And I didn't understand the business of it until later, but my introduction to college athletics was very much at a mid-major level. And I sort of think that weaves into the attitude I've had in relationship to the industry for now, 20 years almost.
Mm-hmm. You hit on a word that we talk about it a lot: curiosity. Now is the golden age for our students to continue. And by the way, Matt, it doesn't matter what you're curious about,
That's
but
right.
be curious. You're never too young or you're never too old to learn. And I have a belief, and I know this pandemic has been brutal on everybody, lost lives and lost businesses. And look, I got devastated the week of March 16 with my business. But I believe that this is going, if a student, because this is the most sophisticated generation of consumers ever, and they have that drive and that passion and that curiosity and that itch, don't you believe this is going to maybe be the golden age for them?
I am wholeheartedly 100% behind that belief. It's interesting. I've been listening to the Learning Leaders Show, which a guy named Ryan Hawk hosts. Ryan played
Mm-hmm.
football at Ohio U in Miami, Ohio. Folks may know his older brother a lot more, who played in the NFL with the last name Hawk, of course. But he interviewed Jeff Immelt, the former CEO, longtime CEO of GE, just recently. And so I'm listening to this the other day, and Jeff says, a career is not a linear progression. Careers are not straight lines, and it is all about, in Jeff's opinion, and I believe this as well. It's how fast can you learn, right? How fast can you learn your craft and offer a value proposition to your organization that outpaces the position you're currently in? How fast can you master the job you're currently in and have an additive value to the rest of the organization
Mm-hmm.
beyond your scope of duty? So, and that starts with being curious. And this old adage of no question, there's no stupid question, is so true. There are better questions than
Right.
questions that are at the start of the learning cycle from a critical thinking standpoint. But a career is not a straight line. Jeff said it best, and the guy's got way more experience in business than you or I, Vince. But I completely agree that curiosity
Mm-hmm.
is the starting point. And you've got to be able to ask questions. You've got to be able to pick up a book or find the right sources who can educate you or connect with the right network within the industry where you can continue to hone your craft and learn about what you are passionate about. Curiosity is so key.
Well, you just hit on another one of our buzzwords, and every time I talk to our students, and by the way, I was saying this prior to the pandemic, is life is not linear.
Right.
So now, especially, we've all been in this tumble cycle together. And one litmus I tell our kids all the time is that future employees, the first question they're going to ask you is, what did you do to improve yourself or others during COVID? Did you binge watch, binge drink, binge sleep, or did you learn a new skill, reposition your brand, and those types of things? And you're on the forefront of everything that's going on in college athletics. And we've had Alan Green from Auburn on. We've had Ross Bjork on. We're having, in fact, I'm interviewing Josh Brooks today, some just tremendous athletic directors. And we've had our eyes opened to so many, and we had Michelle McKenna, the CIO of NFL on, and we've had our eyes opened on brand new opportunities. Mental health is big and emerging. Fanalytics, data analytics, statistician, fan experience, how that fan experience is redefined, legal wagering, NIL. From the perch that you occupy, and Michelle made an interesting statement. She said, I don't hire anybody with a sports or sports marketing background. Now they're coders or engineers or accountants or statisticians or counselors and those types of things. But from the perch you occupy, where do you see where are these opportunities? Because the campus is the ultimate professional lab. And no matter what you go do something to pad that resume and show that you're a hustler and an initiative. So Let's unpack some opportunities. Where do you see them?
Sure, I still think the NBA skill set. It's tough to use the word always or never. So I tell my kids that all the time. There's never an always and there's never a never. But the NBA skill set and an understanding of the financial underpinnings and how the financial engine of a business operates, I still think is vitally critical. And if you really want to advance in the overall sports space, doesn't mean you have to, be a CFO or have your CPA.
Mm-hmm.
You just have to critically understand what drives momentum for a particular business and what that flywheel looks like from a financial standpoint. So you're talking about some specialty areas, and geez, we'd be really remiss not to note the importance of technology and the ability to craft and build new technology. And again, doesn't mean you have to be a coder, but you got to understand what the infrastructure and architecture of how things are built. And maybe most importantly, Vince, it's you have to be able to mold the two sides of the business objectives and what the revenue generators need and how it needs to be built to speak to those who are in positions where software, hardware, whatever they are creating, and being able to speak both languages so you can interpret both
Mm-hmm.
sides, I think is a very important skill these days as well.
Mm-hmm. I think you're spot on about that, and I talked to my son about it. But do you, from the perch you occupy in the people that you're talking to, we're probably going to have full stadiums this fall. Is that what you're seeing and hearing?
I think Scott Strickland, the athletic director at the University of Florida, really said it best the other day in a tweet, and it was to the effect of, me and my peers are certainly pushing towards that threshold, and there's a lot of promise from the epidemiology community that we can achieve that objective. I'd sort of
Mm-hmm.
offer that, what are ADs gonna say these days other than, yeah, we're gonna be at 100%. It's
Mm-hmm.
predominantly what their financial engine is driven off of, so that's their desire. Clearly we know some of this is state by state that are opening quicker, and they truly do have the opportunity to do that in the very near term, where other states are being more cautious. But that does seem like the trajectory we are on. And Scott's attitude towards it of kind of yes, but I thought nailed it. And we need that for college athletics. We need that for the livelihood of a lot of people who in this space have been lifelong employees and contributors to the growth of the industry. So yeah, I think that's where we're headed. It's a yes but scenario, but we're on the right track.
Mm-hmm. Well, I did a podcast called the Six Saturdays in the South, and how so many of these college towns, 20 to 30% of all of their operating revenue and budgets derive from people coming into, say, Auburn is like probably the 10th largest city on any other day, but on the fall it's the third largest city. There's 100 to 150,000 people flood into that town, and then we talk about you know all the people that work at the stadium, and that talk about the ticket takers and the concession workers and the volunteers in concession stands, and everybody's extra security and all of that was impacted. So we are encouraging our students, because we know a lot of them are like, oh, I don't want to go, or I'll watch it on TV. But if you'll get out there, even on these game days, are tremendous job opportunities. Whether it's the tailgate guys helping set up, all the tailgates and those types of things, the catering, the parking. I worked my way 4 years through sports information at Auburn, and when I came out, I had a giant resume, giant set of relationships, and giant. I'd been published 200 times, and I knew I was in the 5 percentile for job searches, and it was just a matter of time. And that's it. It really doesn't matter what a student does. It's that they're doing something, right?
You have to get involved. You have to get involved as soon as you can, and not because it looks good on a resume. You have
Right.
to get involved because the second you get involved, you start understanding this web of how the industry works and how it is interconnected. You have to get involved. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Hmm. Well, here's the thing too. Talk about because I made relationships that I still have in college. Paul Feinbaum, Brent Musburger, Dick Vitale, and now I'm doing business with them. Back then I was 20 years old, for goodness sake. We stressed to our kids the value of relationship building. We stressed to our kids the value of follow up. If they hear Matt Roberts on this podcast, they can reach out to you on LinkedIn and say, "Hey, I heard you on Vince Thompson's podcast. Congratulations on your success." What has been your philosophy on relationship building? Because like you and I knew of one another, and then we got connected through mutual people, and then we got in business together, just all based on an evolution of a relationship and how we treated each other every time we interacted. Because there's got to be that thread of trust at some point.
Right, and there's so much that happens early on in careers, and I sort of think back to the Jim Collins adage of return on luck, which is how are you going to leverage
Bingo.
the situation? Yeah, how are you going to leverage the situations you find yourself in, or the relationships that you're subjected to that you really had no intentional purpose of originally designing. And so for me, I played baseball at UNC Asheville, and then I came home and did my master's here at the University of Louisville. Still didn't quite know where I wanted to go professionally. I knew
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to be in this general term of sports, but I didn't understand the intricacies of what that meant. And I was fortunate enough to get an internship opportunity at the University of Evansville, one AAA athletic department, historically great basketball back in the late 1900s,
Mm-hmm.
the 80s, 90s. Of course, they wore the sleeves, and everybody knows about Evansville basketball because of the purple uniforms with sleeves. The AD at the time at Evansville was a gentleman named Bill McGillis, who's now the athletic director at the University of San Diego out on the West Coast. And I was his personal intern for a whole year, and just got lucky
Wow.
that I got to interview with those guys. And Bill had some sons who played baseball, and so he probably was attuned to a baseball student athlete come, and the amount of exposure that Bill offered to me at the age of 20. I was 22 at the time. I guess I just turned 23 when I went to
Mm-hmm.
Evansville, and he gave me this broad look at college athletics, from the C-suite from day one. At Evansville, there's like 9 employees, man. So everybody is doing everything. So I had this amazing,
Wow.
amazing experience where I'm the PA announcer at women's basketball, and I'm the game ops guy at baseball, and I'm
Right.
tickets, and I'm getting to sell sponsorships. I'm getting to help Bill on coaching searches and personnel searches, and it's a great example of he probably saw more in me than I even knew I was capable of at the time. But that's a relationship that candidly I was
Mm-hmm.
just lucky to fall into, and Bill is one of still on my personal board of directors, if you will. And I spoke to him this morning, and I speak to him relatively frequently. But even if I don't speak to him for 6 months, we haven't missed a beat. And I eventually worked for Bill at the University of South Florida for a couple of years as well. Relationships
Mm-hmm.
and return on luck is so critical. And when you find yourself aligned with a leader or a teammate that you click with, and that you can provide more value to them than they provide to you, that's the key to a great relationship. And that's another Jim Collins staple is the key to a great relationship is if two people say the other person is the one who provides more value in the relationship, then both sides are getting tremendous output from the situation. So I would emphasize for students to think about return on luck, and when you are given the opportunity to build a valuable relationship with a leader or teammate, you have to take advantage of those opportunities. And you truly don't know where they lead, but they're going to be a net value plus down the road, I assure you.
I like that return on luck, and also we tell our kids is that the first two letters of relationship are RE, and the first two letters of reciprocal are RE. And you can't look at relationships as transactional because people say, well, Vince, how do you represent Coca-Cola for 21 years? I go, I've never taken a relationship for granted.
Sure.
In any relationship, professional, personal, romantic, whatever it is, you have got to, groom that flower, groom that vegetable, water it, trim it, fertilize it, and it'll continue to blossom and grow. But the second you ignore it, it's going to get stale and it's going to wither and it's going to wilt away. And I think that, you just, the same with me. I mean, I took that shot with David Housel, and I was over there in the athletic department that afternoon and had a ringside seat to some of the greatest athletes in the world, Bo and Charles and all that. But so let's fast forward a little bit. You've been a very successful entrepreneur at several levels, but what motivated you to form D1 Ticker and athletic director? You knowing that you were diving into a crowded, breach and a lot of, content and covering sports business, the Vonage Sports Business Journal. I had thought all along that there was a gap in the type of information that I needed as a corporate marketer. I think the Sports Business Journal does a great job, but they were choosing what they thought I needed to know, as opposed to letting me choose what I needed to know. And so when I get your, newsletters daily, it's literally a must read. And every day within that, there's a nugget that I reshare with my team, of what's going on in the marketplace. So give us a little background on the formation of this, because as I tell my students, if they aren't subscribing to D1 Ticker, then they are really truly missing out on a fountain of information and knowledge.
So let's go back to the conversation about relationships. And so I spent nearly 3 years at Evansville working for Bill McGillis, another 2 years at the University of South Florida. And part of the founding story of D1 Ticker is, and many of your students that are listening will know, what happens in college athletics is you sort of have to pick a path, right? Like, are you a fundraiser? Can you generate revenue through selling tickets? Are you going to work in compliance? Are you a great marketer? Can you be a student athlete services staffer who helps student athletes navigate their way academically, socially, mental health wise, otherwise, wellness, through their time on a campus? I was so fortunate that I never had to pick my path, and I got to do a lot of different jobs within the athletic department without having to say I'm just a marketer or I'm just a ticket sales guy. And that's, again, a combination of Bill and working at a place like Evansville, where you have to do it all because it's a small team.
Right.
So, this was 2005 through 2010, 2004 through 2010, in that age, or in that time range. And there simply wasn't an effective product that informed the executive leadership of an athletic department. And here's the other thing you got to realize. Vince, you know this, but the daily schedules for these guys and gals, for these leaders, is incredibly busy. I mean, they are up and at it.
It's crazy.
5 a.m., 6 a.m., and their first meeting is probably at 7:30, and they're probably at a game until 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock that night, and they're packed all between there. So when I left college athletics, I left college athletics late in 2010 for two reasons. One, to start a new business with another great friend and mentor of mine here in Louisville, in the road race management space. And he had already built a very notable sports business in the cheerleading and dance industry, which my wife had worked for years and was an advancing executive on that side of the company. But even when I got out of college athletics, again, back to the word curiosity, I was still fascinated and curious about how the industry worked and why certain things were happening, who would get what job. And I had this great network of friends and contemporaries that I'd constantly be texting, and no different than what happens today. Who's going to get what job? Which search firm's going to handle what search? But there was this void, and because I had seen the industry from the C-suite for 5+ years, there was this void of a product that efficiently informed executive leaders in college athletics on the most important and contextual developments around the space in a given day. There were other products out there that, in my estimation, didn't hit on the most important developments in a given day. They just, had a selected handful that weren't comprehensive enough or weren't targeted enough primarily to the D1 audience. We, of course, started in the D1 space with D1 Ticker. And at the time, there was a gentleman from Silicon Valley named Jason Calacanis who had started a product called Launch Ticker. And it was the same concept, but in the technology and startup space, right? And so I would listen to Jason all the time. He did this week in startups live show that would be video casted and podcasted. And eventually, right, the light went on over my head of, wait a second, I've had this perspective of college athletics from the C-suite for 5 years, and there's not a product like Launch Ticker that's informing leaders in Division I college athletics of the most important stuff that's happened in a very tight editorial format. So from there, I think enough of my contemporaries said, like, shut up and quit telling us about this idea, just do it. And so, January 1 of 2013, we literally started pecking out D1 Ticker, and it was a convergence of a lens and perspective into the industry, along with some new age digital tools. Like, that's when Twitter first really started moving, and you could find just about anything through Google
Right.
search or LexisNexis. And if you knew which journalists held the keys to different pockets of information, and Vince, like Feinbaum in the SEC, and Adam Rittenberg in the Big Ten, and David Teal in the ACC, and John Wilner in the Pac-12. Once you understood who held the key to particular pockets of the nation and particular athletic departments, John Talty, certainly now in the SEC down at AL.com, and Michael Casagrande. I mean,
he's a beast.
Yeah, I mean, there's a dozen or 2 dozen of these folks, and the Athletic has a whole slew of them now that cover college athletics in such detail, and they do an amazing job. Once you understand who they are, when we joke now, like, D1 Ticker is not a hard business as long as you have the right lens. It's the same developments every single day, just different school and a different monetary amount, different financial amount. Otherwise, it's basically the same stuff happening over and over again. But you got to know where to look, and you got to know what's important to that C-suite.
Well, I love that, and speaking of that, I think even prior to the pandemic, college athletics, college business was undergoing a seismic shift, and one thing that we talk about a lot, and we'll get to NIL for a minute though, but you don't realize that the CEO at the athletic director at a Division I school is really the CEO of a $100 to $150 million organization, with very complex moving parts. But then you break it down, and a big thing I'm on right now is that athletic directors are also going to have to get in the real estate business. And what do I mean by that? Why do these stadiums sit empty for 359 days a year? Now you've got Topgolf going into Sanford Stadium, and why would you have a Bulldog brew pub in there? And why wouldn't you have condos and daycare and weddings and drive-in movies and all these kind of things? And I think that the pandemic is going to force the hands on that. But within that, create so many opportunities for the fans and our students to get great jobs and make good money in those environments. Don't you see that coming?
Yes, and this is another link in the chain of why you have to understand how the financial engine of an athletic department or the overall fabric of a community works, but also these third-party businesses of those who could partner in college athletics to generate additional value proposition financially and otherwise for the marketplace. The working through the infrastructure of how businesses make money and why they make money, and what category or segment of the market they are intending to address. That critical thinking skill, again, is so vital. No matter, and I'll just repeat, it doesn't mean you need to have a finance degree. It doesn't mean right. You need to be a CPA, but you have to be able to critically think about how a business runs and how its engine operates, both your own business that you are a part of, but those third-party businesses that can add additional value to the overall marketplace. You got to be able to think critically on the answer or the questions they're trying to answer in that type of relationship as well.
Mm-hmm. And obviously the big one is, and you and I are very involved in this, name, image, and likeness is long overdue, and I think it's going to be a monster game changer. And I know everybody focuses on Trevor and Tua and all this, but I believe that it's going to be such a panacea for all the college athletes, women's equestrian, gymnastics, bringing new money into it. But these students are surrounded by these athletes every day. And if they'll look around them, there may be an opportunity to help some of these student athletes manage their social media and those types of things. And I know that you're obviously bullish on NIL, but explain it to our listeners through your lens where those opportunities are for those students, because those are peers of these students. My son is in school with, all the Georgia players. He's in classes with them and all that. And we get to the other side of this pandemic, but I think it's the biggest business opportunity for students in college sports in 50 years.
Think about where some of our best relationships were forged. Whether you were on a
Bingo.
sports team or not, it's in college, right? You spend so much time meeting new people in college and developing friendships and respectable relationships with these folks. The asset that students have in spades is time. And how are you going to use that time to advance yourself and to learn? Goes back to the beginning of our conversation. So many of the student athletes who are learning how to navigate this space, and there's a long tail here. I mean, we're talking a decade plus before this whole thing shakes out and we understand where the value lies for all parties. But if I was a college student right now, and look, I'm only 38 years old, but I couldn't tell you the first thing about strategy around TikTok. It's passed me by, man, and I have an 8-year-old daughter who wonders,
right.
to me. I just can't get there mentally. But
right.
Strategically understanding social media and how you build affinity on different social media platforms and different mediums and different creative lengths and types is just one example that current students can critically help current student athletes think through. And I think we all could point to our college days and relationships that were valuable with our peers. And I'm thinking about Trevor Bauer right now. And Trevor Bauer, as we know, just signed this monster deal with the Los Angeles Dodgers. And his agent is a former UCLA women's gymnastics student athlete who was, in Westwood when Trevor was there. And now she represents Trevor.
Wow.
And so the relationship that was built there when they were both on campus is invaluable, not just financially for both of them, but truly.
Bingo.
Yeah. So that's an example of why you really need to be involved, why you need to apply yourself to situations that might make you uncomfortable, to meet new people, because you never know where they may lead. In the NIL space, we don't know where it's going. I mean, literally, as we sit here today, Vince, as you and I talk about frequently, the NCAA and Congress and lawmaking outfits have not specifically indicated how NIL is going to be handled. And I'm speaking nationally because we know some states have legislation in place already. So what a blue ocean, a blue sky out there of how to define where you can play in this space. And it's going to be fascinating to watch. And obviously we are business participants, but for students today, this is a space where they should be really following closely and thinking about how their own value and their own curiosity could apply, because it's going to be a monster.
Yeah, you just summed it up very, very well. So, great conversation. In closing, if somebody and you get solicitations all the time, I get solicitations all the time, and I know what gets my attention or what turns me on when somebody reaches out to me, and I know what doesn't. You probably wouldn't be shocked, but you would be shocked. I still get resumes at our generic careers at Melt ATL. To whom it may concern, here's my resume. I need to make X amount of dollars. It could be the Pope, and I don't even look at the dadgum resume because you got to be in a cave with Bin Laden not to figure out how to track me down and who I am. And I used to have to go to the library and get yellow pages and encyclopedias.
Yeah. I've got a great resume story, and then I'm going to let you finish your question, but I've got to tell.
No. Yeah, I want to hear it.
It's too hilarious, but it goes to your point. So I get to Evansville again. I think this is 2005, and just so happens that I must have been the 100th person employee at the University of Evansville with the initials MR, Matt Roberts, MR. My email address during my time at Evansville was mr100@evansville.edu. I cannot tell you how many emails I would get from people submitting resumes, and it would start, "Dear Mr. 100." And literally they'd go straight in the trash.
No way.
And true story, Vince.
No way.
True story. I would get, Dear Mr. 100, please accept my application to da 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 da, attaches my resume and whatever else. I'm going, you didn't take the time to just look on the website and go, Mr. 100, who the hell would Mr. 100 be? There is no Mr. 100. Look it up. Do a little bit of research. And as you're noting, it does not.
Oh my.
100% true story, man. And the key is, it does not take much effort to, as you said, get to somebody. We are all so accessible on social media. It does not take much effort to personally reach out, and it is what separates you from the pack. But don't send emails that are, "Dear Mr. 100." Give me a break.
I'm gonna use that one again, but this is the point. First of all, a kid will spend $200,000, and that's all you got. Secondly, I'm preaching to the kids here. I'm saying, hey, look, this is not a job application. It's a job process. It's a job audition. And now with the pandemic, I used to use a fishing analogy. It'd take 100 casts to get 8 bites to get 2 job leads. Now it's going to be 500 because there's so many people looking for jobs, willing to take less for less money. But you're telegraphing effort and preparation and all of the intangibles that you and I are looking for somebody that makes a great intern or a great employee. And I'll tell you another one that just happened to me last week. So, like I said, my industry's been devastated, but I'm starting to see green shoots and I'm starting to hire again. And this young person had been hounding me for 6 months for a job. Like, incredible credentials. So finally offer them a job. And I'm still not comfortable with hiring people because the industry's not back yet, but I know I got to start kind of getting out there a little bit. And the first thing they did was want to negotiate with me on the salary. And I'm like, what? And so guess what I did? I rescinded the offer because there were 999. And then they go, well, that's what I was taught in school, to always negotiate and counter. I'm like, well, you clearly weren't taught common sense, and you weren't taught by somebody that had never made a payroll. And by the way, have you noticed that my industry has been devastated and that this is money coming out of my pocket? So, and then they write back and go, oh, I didn't mean it, and da-da-da-da-da. And of course, guess what? That ship has sailed because, I say you marry like you date. And that person was showing me what type of employee they were going to be even before I hired them. So I hated to do a little tough love and help a life lesson, but hopefully they took something out of that. But I'm telling you, I think long term this is good that the kids have been thrown into this tumble cycle because they had the expectation they were going to be the CEO when they got in my organization in 3 months.
Yeah, you got to be able to read a room and read a marketplace is, I think, one of the lessons of what
that's a good way
situation. But the other note here is, just like when we all grew up playing sports, and no matter what level you ascended to, whether it was just high school or college, or played pro ball, whatever it was, the power of a team and being a good teammate, and a lot of times maybe you're so worried about yourself and where are you going to go, and how do you get to the next step? How do I get raised, and how do I get that promotion to the title, and how do I nothing's accomplished without a dynamic team. I mean, life period, whether it's a family, a business, a church. I mean, team play and being a respectful and valuable teammate is such an underrated skill, especially in the society we live in today that is, hyper fueled by social media. But the ability to not just be a great teammate, but to understand how to build a great team, you're never going to get anywhere without a great team. So, we talk about fit all the time, and it's okay if you don't get a job. You may not fit there. And by the way, that might not be the right organization for you. And so you've got to do your diligence on what kind of team you want to be on, and you got to decide what kind of teammate you are going to be.
Yeah, there's no I in team, that's for sure. And you just nailed it on the head. So this has been, I know you're busy. It's been tremendous. Matt Roberts, brilliant, successful entrepreneur. He and I are going to be making some waves with our partner, Jason Belzer and SANIL, D1, D2, D3.ticker. Athletic director, dear friend, we really, really appreciate you sharing your time and words of wisdom with the students of virtual Melt University. And I'm sure you're going to get a lot of positive feedback from this. So, Matt, thank you so much today.
You got it, Vince. Anytime. Glad to finally make this happen. And thanks to Kyle for connecting the dots. Look forward to hearing from anybody who reaches out. Thanks again.
Thanks, Vince. We hope you've enjoyed today's virtual class. We'll be back soon with a new edition of Melt University 2021.